Now you're watching Gearz.
You're watching Gearz.
You know, one of the cool things about building and working on a vehicle yourself is that the rig just naturally starts to take on a personality of its own, and it can't help it. But it's not about how much money you spend. No, man, it's about imagination and creativity. And the more imaginative and creative you are, well, the cooler the vehicle gets, no matter what you're working on. And a prime example of that is the rat roaster. Last week, we stuffed a vintage-looking 580 horse blown small block Chevy and a 5-speed into a lightweight 32 Roadster body. And that puts us well on our way to fulfilling the goals that we had for this project, to basically be what would have been the baddest thing on the street in 1968, in both looks and performance. And man, it's cool. But there is a lot more to building a cool vehicle than just an engine and a transmission. No, it's how you finish things out. You know, take care of the details. That's what's going to make a vehicle unique and really cool. That's what we're going to focus on today, starting with the exhaust. Now, like I said last week, we teamed up with Sanderson Headers and created a special rat roaster header. Now, the key to this header is to not only have a functional header cap, but it's also to kind of hide the exhaust that runs under the frame so you can't really see it from the side. Now, the problem with that, as you can see, the exhaust exits right into the bottom of the frame rail. Yeah, it's kind of hard to hook a pipe to that. So we're going to have to notch the bottom of the frame. First, we'll cut out the area that needs to be removed with a plasma cutter. Then dress the cuts with a grinder. Now, getting the car up in the air on jack stands or on a lift will definitely help you here. Now, basically what I've done is cut a notch in the bottom of the frame so the exhaust goes through the bottom of the frame as it goes under the car. Now, notice it's sitting at an angle. That's because that is how it comes out of the header. So this is going to be really cool, but we're not done yet. I know some of you guys are looking at it going, oh man, you just cut a hole in the bottom of your frame, man. That cannot be good. It's not if you leave a gaping hole there. No, you've got to box in the bottom of the cut so it's solid like the rest of the frame. Now, the best way to do that is to get a nice thick piece of steel tubing and cut your replacement piece out of this. Now, make sure that you are using a piece that is at least as thick or thicker in the wall as your existing frame rails. That way you're not going to have a strength issue. There we go. Now we'll just take the cut piece, stick it in the press to close the ends up to where it matches the pipe better. Once you have the boxing piece for the notch fitting right, weld it in and finish it off. And that is it. Now, a C-notch like this is great, as long as you don't get too deep into the frame. Matter of fact, a good rule of thumb is, if you're going to get halfway into the frame or more, you need to take a different approach, because that's going to weaken the frame too much. But one like this, take a look. We still have 5 inches of frame above that notch, which is plenty strong. All right, let's put the header on, see what we got. All right, take a look at this. The exhaust runs out of the header, through the frame, and under the car. Now, if you look at that just right, from the right angle, you will see that modification. But most of the time, especially from the side, man, you will never know that's there. That is so cool. That's so sneaky, man. I love it. Now, that takes care of the exhaust under the car. What about this? I mean, the whole idea about having a header cap is to be able to pop the cap and run straight out of the headers when you want. The problem is, what do you do to get it corked back up before the cops get here? Yeah, typical hot rod dilemma. We have the typical hot rod answer over here on the table. What we've got here is a pair of dual electric exhaust cutouts from a place called QuickTime Performance. Now this is basically just a flat flange with an electric motor installed, and that electric motor actuates this big butterfly valve. So when you hit the switch, those babies come open. You are running right out of the headers, man. This is awesome. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about leakage? Well, check this out. These are machined with a little ledge here on both sides. So when that butterfly comes closed, notice it goes right down and seals against that ledge. These are designed to be leak-free. Now, what we're gonna do is bolt it to the back of the collector in place of the cap. We're gonna get rid of that. Then we're gonna follow it up with this turnout. So when we're driving down the road, everything nice and quiet, that's what you've got. When we wanna be really nasty, we flip the switch and open they come. These will get you into some serious trouble. Now, the good thing about these QTP cutouts is that you don't have to be doing a project like this to put them on. I mean, you can put them on anything, a car, truck, whatever you're working on. And with a cool factor like this, what are you waiting for, man? This is what hot rodding's all about. Now, since this is a custom application, the first thing you need to do is to decide where you're gonna put your cutout. Now, QTP designs these cutouts to where they sit down at an angle, which is gonna be nice. It'll tuck up under the frame. But as you can see, we have got a clearance issue here with the frame. So we're gonna have to notch it just like we did back here. And since you already know how to do that, it's a good time to take a break while I finish this up. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where today we are working on the rat roaster and doing some wild exhaust modifications that you can do to your project to make it cool and unique and different than anything else out there. Now, we're in the final steps of putting this QTP exhaust cutout on our headers. So let's take a look how this is all gonna go together. With the frame notched, the cutout just bolts up to the collector, followed by the turnout. All right, take a look at how this is tucking up underneath here. It's very clean, very stealthy, and like before, with this car down on the ground, you are gonna have to look really hard to even see that that is on there, and that is cool. But the way it looks is only part of it. The real issue here is functionality. So how does it work? Well, let's take a look. With it closed, the exhaust runs under the car, nice and quiet. Then you push the button, and open it comes. It is wide open in your face. And there you have it, a super sneaky 2-in-1 exhaust system that has the look of the outside header exhaust that everybody wanted in '68. But this has a little bit of new technology to make it usable. Oh, man, think of the trouble you could get into with this, man. Guy pulls up beside you at a stoplight, drinking coffee, talking on his cell phone. You uncork that, man. It's gonna be time for him to change his shorts. Now, I've got one other thing that I want to show you before we get off of the exhaust. Obviously, I am tying that car into 1968 in a whole bunch of ways. However, I also hooked up with the Gibson Guitars Custom Shop because 1958 marks the 50th anniversary of one of the most iconic rock and roll machines, the 335. And we are gonna build a rat roaster 335. And you guessed it, gonna have exhaust blowing right out of the guitar. It's gonna be awesome. Now, they've got me doing the preliminary design work and the metal work, then they're gonna finish up the woodworking and put it all together. But you're gonna have to wait for this because obviously it's still something that we're working on. Okay, the next thing we're gonna take a look at is a subtle little modification that just makes a world of difference on a 32 Ford. And notice we have a great body line coming down, makes a nice swoop until you get here. You got the frame rail coming out at a weird angle, you got big gaps along here, And that's because there used to be a fender here. When you pull the fenders off, man, you open up all kinds of stuff here. Now, generally the way to fix that is to take the gas tank out, relocate it into the car, and then come in and cut the frame and rock it up or just bob it off altogether. The problem is, remember, that's a rumble seat. I'd rather keep the tank back here than up there in somebody's lap. This would be a little safer. So the good news is there is a way to run a gas tank back here and make this look better. And that's what we're going to show you. These pieces come from Steve's Auto Restoration, and they are handmade filler panels that are designed to put a nice finished edge on the bottom of a deuce body. Now, when you buy these things from Steve, they will actually hand make them to fit your body because they're all a little different. Notice that this is actually 3 pieces all welded together and metal finished out. This is a nice piece of work. All right, here's how they fit. Slide under the body. Now look, you've got a nice edge that rolls all the way down to the frame, nice and smooth. It's tight around the gas tank. That is going to be really cool when it's on. Okay, that's what it does. This is how to put it on. Since the pieces are trimmed to fit, the first step is to mark them and then trim them to fit the body. Now make sure you take your time here because you want the fit to be perfect. Hey, we're back, and right in the middle of welding on these body extensions so we have a nice smooth radiused edge here at the bottom of this Roadster body. Now, you can bolt these on, you can rivet them on, but that's going to leave you with this horizontal line, and that's not going to look very good. But if you weld them on, grind that down, that'll totally disappear and it'll look really good. As with any time you're welding sheet metal, you'll want to use spot welds spaced a few inches apart so you don't overheat the metal and warp it. Just keep adding spot welds until you have a solid, continuous weld. Now, don't expect this to look good. What you're after are penetration and good, solid welds. Now, anytime you're doing this kind of work, clamping things in place is key. And I have got a special clamp to show you right now. Tool Tech, brought to you by Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals since 1919. 2 of the biggest problems that you're going to face when you are welding sheet metal is clamping 2 pieces together and filling holes and gaps. And this little guy here from Cornwell Tools is designed to take care of both of those problems. Now, it's got a locking handle, just like a pair of vice grips. Then up here on the business end, you got a little copper pad on one side and then what looks like a gun sight on the other. Now, what this lets you do is clamp 2 pieces together, leaving whatever gap that you want to put your weld in, or you can clamp it over a hole and then just come in here and weld it up because the copper will not stick to the weld. So if you're welding sheet metal, this guy here can make your life a whole lot easier. It can be that third hand you always wish you had. And that is what a good tool is for. Once the welding is done, now comes the grinding. And all you're doing is knocking off the top of the weld and blending it into the panels. I like to start with a flap wheel and then finish it off with a die grinder. All right, the corners are in, but we're not done yet. What about this area right here? That's where this 3rd piece from SAR comes in. Now, it is designed to fill that area. So, using the same techniques, we are going to mount this thing. Man, that's going to be fantastic. See how that's just going to roll down? Nice. right, with the gas tank in place, you can start to see now what we're doing. Now obviously I still have some finish work to do here. Another round with the welder and the grinder to fill some of these spots. And also I'm going to come in here and open that gap up to where it's uniform. But take a look at this. Now the body runs all the way down to the frame. It rolls under, nice finished edge. Going to have a nice tight uniform gap around the gas tank. Now the rear end looks symmetrical, it looks finished. Well, except for one thing. I probably should put some sort of a bumper on this. And that is what this is, some sort of a bumper. This is called a spreader bar, and it just bolts between the frame rails, and it's going to give us some sort of protection to that gas tank. Not a lot, but some. You know, there's no doubt that having a cool car truck to mess around with and wrench on is great. I mean, everybody should have one. And most people do have some sort of project laying around, whether it's an old muscle car or a Jeep or a hunting rig or whatever. And this '69 Mustang is a prime example of that. The problem is, very few people are using cars like this as a daily driver anymore. They're mostly toys. I mean, there's something that you take out and terrorize the neighborhood with on the weekend. That's great, but it also means that a vehicle like this or your hunting rig can sit for weeks, months, and never be touched. And then when you do get ready to drive it, you go out, you turn the key, nothing happens. So what do? Well, I've got some tips here to help you set your vehicle up for short-term storage, so when you do get ready to drive it, you go out, you turn the key, the motor fires up, all the electrical works, and you head down the road. Now, setting a vehicle up to sit for a little while is not hard. Matter of fact, it's not expensive either. You can get pretty much anything that you're going to need at your local auto parts store. The big key to remember here, though, is the better shape the vehicle is when you park it, the more likely it is to fire up and run when you're ready for it. So, we're going to take a look at electrical first, because that's where most of your problems are going to come from. Okay, a couple of facts here. Number one, any battery, no matter how good it is going to slowly discharge over time if you don't use it. Number two, come here. Your battery connections, your wiring connections, those can get corrosion on them over time and cause a bad connection. So, the best way to prevent this, clean the battery terminals thoroughly, and then, before you put it back together, use these specially treated felt washers. They'll prevent corrosion on the posts. Then, spray all of your electrical connections with a protectant. To keep your battery up, well, you either need to start the vehicle periodically and let it run for a while, or you're going to want to invest in a little trickle charger. Now, all this does is hooks to a good battery, keeps it charged up, ready to go over a period of time without overcharging it and destroying it. Also, the electrical on the engine is very important. You need to make sure that everything is tuned up with nice fresh parts, because old nasty wires and old yucky plugs are going to be a real problem after they sat for a month or so. All right, what about fluids like gas? Good question, because a lot of people don't realize that gas can go bad. It turns into some sort of a varnish goo kind of thing that not only makes the engine run bad, but can gum up the whole system. So the way to keep that from happening is put some fresh gas in the tank and then pour in some fuel stabilizer. This will treat the gas and keep it nice and fresh for a long time. Now, speaking of fluids, what about oil? Well, having some fresh oil in a filter is a wise thing to do, because the last thing you want to do to your engine after it's sat for a while is to pump it full of old, nasty, rancid, sludgy oil. Doing something like this is just a wise investment. The last two things we're going to look at is protecting the interior and the exterior. And we do that with a vinyl protectant and a wax. And the reason we do that is they don't just make the car look better, they actually protect it from dust and oxidation and cat paws and all the stuff that happens when you park a car. So they're worth doing. Now, the final point here is, if you spend some time prepping a vehicle for some downtime, when you are ready to roll, it'll be ready to roll. And hopefully it'll run so well that you might even rethink parking it all together. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
And now, what are you working on?
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Brian Edwards from Columbia, South Carolina, and he has got a sports car project. He's got a 79 Porsche 911 SC. Now, before you think Brian is rich, take a look at what he started with here, man. This car was a basket case. And we said it was cosmetically rough, but it was pretty sound mechanically, no rust to speak of. So he and his dad gutted the car, pulled out the engine and transmission. Here's a shot of Brian in the engine bay working on the car, and they started putting it back together. Now, according to Brian, this is how it would work. About every 3 months or so, he'd fly back into town, and he and his dad would work all weekend on the car. Now, according to Brian's dad, he didn't get a lot of help out of Brian, because Brian spent a lot of time doing this and making engine sounds. We've all been there, man. Then after 2.5 years, the car came back together. It's got racing brakes, racing seats, 5-point harness, roll cage, racing pedals. You can see where they're going with this thing. And then for the first time in March '07, they took it out on the racetrack, and check it out, man, they raced it. This is great. That's what makes this project so cool. It is not just a father-son thing, which is great in itself, but they spent 2.5 years putting this car together, and now they take it out and they race it, they use it, man. That is what this is all about. So, great project, guys. Great color, great car. We love it. Now, for those of you out there that are wondering how to get your vehicle featured on the show, man, send something in to gearstv.com. We'll see if we can get it on the air. All right, that takes care of it for today. We're going to see if we can talk Brian into giving us the keys to the Porsche. That means it's time for you to go out and work on something. We'll see you next week.